But that wasn't even the best segment on the show Monday. That was the promo with CM Punk, Drew McIntyre, and Seth Rollins. Mostly Punk and McIntyre. And then Seth came out and he didn't ruin it. It could have gone downhill. Because you never know with Seth and his cackling and all of his bullshit. But he didn't ruin it. They were in Chicago, which is Punk country. This was the first promo since this man came back to the company that felt like a real CM Punk promo. It felt like the kind of promo he would have cut during his first run. It felt like the kind of promo he was cutting during his feuds in AEW with, Eddie Kingston and MJF. The first time in a very long time that we have had a real CM Punk promo. He said that he would be at WrestleMania. He pushed the idea of WWE bringing WrestleMania back to Chicago at some point. The last arena show they ever did for a WrestleMania was in Chicago. But they've never done a stadium show there. Soldier Field. I know Soldier Field is the smallest of all the NFL stadiums. That's probably one reason they have not run there for WrestleMania. That and the weather. Late March, early April, it's a crapshoot. They've run New York before, and it's also a crapshoot with the weather, but probably not like Chicago. I think Soldier Field fits a max of like 60,000 people. So you factor in the elaborate WrestleMania stage, and it would end up being a lot less than that. But he said people have made all kinds of suggestions about what he could do at Mania. He could host the show, he could be a referee. The people were mostly into the idea of him being a referee. And then he name-dropped a whole bunch of people, including Pat McAfee, for having Roman Reigns on his podcast, because Roman made a comment about Punk. He said, Pat, I don't listen to your show. The only shows I listen to are The Experience and The Drive-Thru. And I'm sure the Cult of Cornette was very happy about that. Cornette did not just get one plug. He got two on the show. So Punk said he would see Roman when he was on his way down the mountain and Punk was on his way up. Then he brought up Seth Rollins, who he said laughed at him for getting hurt, which was funny, he said, coming from someone with two bad knees. He mentioned The Rock, and how The Rock is the one guy that has not had something to say about him. But that might be because 10 years ago, when he and Rock came face to face, he realized that his arms were just too short to box with God. And then he brought up Drew McIntyre, which brought out McIntyre. And they sniped at each other. He mocked Drew wearing a kilt. I felt like I was listening to Bobby Heenan talking about Roddy Piper 35 years ago. Drew told him to be careful, you could get canceled for talking like that in 2024. Drew then dropped the line of the night, the line of the year, when he said the most ironic thing about Punk is this straight edge thing. You never drink, you never do drugs, and yet you spend all your time in rehab. I adored that line. I don't know who came up with it. It was probably Drew, because Drew's been coming up with a lot of good shit lately, but too perfect. Too perfect. He said Punk is his muse. He looks to him for inspiration when he can't finish a set at the gym or at Elimination Chamber when he thought he had no chance of winning. He thought of Punk and he was able to find a way to push through. And Drew said he's always been the chosen one, which was the old name when he first got called up. He first got brought in. Vince McMahon on television anointed him as the chosen one. So Punk said, chosen one? Who chose you? Who? What was his name? Tell me what paragon of good virtue chose you. And they cut to a tight shot of McIntyre's face. He had a big smile on his face. He looked like he was about to crack. But he held it together. He went right up to that line. And he dipped his toe in the water but never actually dove in. But he came close. He didn't have to, though. Everybody knew exactly who he was talking about. And I know Mike Johnson on PWInsider.com said that there was a hush backstage when Punk alluded to Vince, but there was no fallout for him making that reference. So McIntyre suggested that Punk be the guest commentator for his match at WrestleMania so that he could be sitting at ringside watching Drew win the title. And that brought out Seth Rollins, who went face-to-face with Punk in the ring. McIntyre continued to sit on top of the announce desk cross-legged like Punk. Rollins pointed out the brace on Punk's arm when the idea came up of him being the referee. So Punk just dropped down to the mat and he counted 3 with his one good arm, which was a weird thing to do if they were not actually planning to make him the referee for the title match. But Punk said he didn't actually think he could be objectively fair with these two dipshits, and said that he would be ringside to do commentary for the world title match at WrestleMania. So then the focus turned to Punk and Rollins, who asked Punk if he wanted to know what he thought. You want to know what I think? And Punk goes, nope. Further burying this man beneath the earth. I didn't think he could go any deeper. Rollins said Punk means nothing to him. He's a non-factor. And Punk needs him to have a moment at WrestleMania. He says Punk can do whatever he wants at the show, but the one thing he needs to do is stay out of his way. And Punk guaranteed he would do something that McIntyre, the lips in his boots, the shoe polish in his beard, the skirt and the stupid sword he comes out with, and Rollins with his bell bottoms and his championship and his wife, that none of them could ever do, which is make the both of them interesting. And they hit Punk's music. He left the ring. McIntyre said, cut that music. He's not even in the match at WrestleMania. You don't get the last word. And he called Punk his number one stan. And he dropped an Eminem reference after that. And he ended up eating a super kick and a curb stomp from Rollins. And then Rollins blew right past Punk on his way to the back. This was an incredible segment. It went way longer than it was supposed to. And I'm glad it did. They had me glued the entire time. This is what I mean when I bring up attitude. You have three men who either legitimately do not like each other, and I'm mainly talking about Punk and Seth, and Punk and Drew, not Drew and Seth. Either that, or they're good enough at their jobs to convince you that maybe there's some legitimate heat there. Like, you're not entirely sure. Yeah, with Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels in 97, you knew that they didn't like each other. It came through on TV. It radiated through the television. And I know it caused a lot of drama that year behind the scenes, but damn if it didn't make for compelling TV back then. That's what this was. You know, when the promos are this good, I don't have a problem with them eating up time on the show. Just give me something compelling that's going to make me, that's going to get me talking and get me to want to see the eventual match. The matches that I most wanted to see coming out of this segment, unfortunately, were all the ones that we're not getting at WrestleMania. Of all the matches they set up here, the one that we are actually getting is the least compelling of the three. But with Punk at ringside, that makes it a little more interesting. PW Insider had some details about the creative behind the segment. The entire thing was very much improvised and off the cuff, which was pretty clear but just by watching it. There was a general idea of where they would finish up, getting over the idea of CM Punk as the color commentator for the World Heavyweight title match. But beyond that, it was very much left up to the talents to play off each other. The segment went way longer than initially expected, but there was no heat on anybody because of it, because it was so great. The next few segments had some time cut to make up for the time they lost. And when the quarter hours came in, and that segment was far and away the largest viewed segment on Raw, averaging 2.2 million viewers, there was a lot of excitement internally, feeling they had established even more momentum for WrestleMania, since Punk set up Rollins and McIntyre to look just as strong as he did in his hometown, leaving the door open for big matches with both when Punk is cleared to return. So don't ever let anybody tell you that the ratings don't mean anything. They may not mean what they used to, but they scrutinize those numbers every bit as much today as they did 25 years ago when they come in, because it's still a good barometer. Not the only barometer, but it's still a good barometer of what's working and what's not. It's a barometer of what people want to see more of and what or who they want to see less of. Now, once Punk is medically cleared, if he can stay healthy, and that's the key, because he is 45 years old, coming off 3 significant injuries in the last 2 years. It's not even a question anymore of can he behave himself. It's can he stay healthy. In one segment, he just set himself up for 3 huge matches. The first one being with Drew McIntyre, because that has to be the first one. The second one being with Seth Rollins. And the third one, eventually, being with Roman Reigns. Now, he mentioned The Rock also in this segment, but I don't think we're getting a third Punk Rock match. But Punk has at least a year's worth, I would say, maybe even 18 months of programs already waiting for him when he comes back, if he can stay healthy.